Hello, Black America.
In the last segment, we were just kind of discussing the end of this 2024 political season and which things are most concern us or which things we think are most impactful to Black America. We talked a little about education in the first segment. But one other thing that we need to get into is his promise to deport up to 15 million people.
Up to 15 million.
Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that 15 million people are going to actually leave America.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, is he going to start with the people working at Mar-a-Lago that aren't there?
Hey, potentially. They're on the real estate development sites. There's a lot of people. I've talked about this in our neighborhoods in East Orange, where you walk by some of these real estate development sites, and you could just see that there's a lot of people from various countries. Do we know if they're all legal or not? No, we don't. But we do know that if they're not legal, then they're taking jobs from people who should be working there legally. And they're gonna hurt the the wages, because they're gonna work for less, because they're gonna be paid cash, and these are jobs that our community should have. So I don't debate the idea of people who shouldn't be in the country not being in the country. But what I do consider is really two things. One, the focus on certain types of people, be it ethnicities or the way they look, versus other immigrants, and what that means second when it comes time to get them. Because who's going to do this job? If we're going to deport, I'm going to hold President Trump accountable to what he said he's going to do, just as we would do any politician as an independent broadcast. We would hold anybody accountable to just the things they said. We're not pulling up any political commentary of someone else who said this. We only want to focus on what specifically come out of President Trump's mouth. How do we do it? Because when you consider the National Guard, in his Time magazine interview, he said, when they asked him, would you consider using the military? He said, probably the National Guard. It's going to take all hands on deck, because you can't pull this many people from their existing jobs to this new role of basically, being an extension of, ICE, so to speak, and having them do brand new tasks for 40 hours a week. What about the job that you pulled them from? So we're going to need a lot of new people coming in. And here's what I'm watching for: the Proud Boys. I'm watching for the private militia who is already raising their hand. You need us to do the job. We're here for you.
Perhaps some of those people from Charlottesville, Virginia.
Anybody willing to do the job. Because at this, there's people who want to do this job. There's people who are like
volunteering.
You ain't got to pay me for the first 30 days. Let me get in there, raise some hell. Y'all might not want to pay me after you see what I'm going to do in the first 30 days. And this is truly my concern. Who's going to do this job? Go ahead. What you got?
That is certainly a concern of mine as well. But you said something at the beginning of your statement there. You don't know you can't tell who's a citizen by looking at them, right? So those brown folks that are walking the streets, it becomes like the stop and frisk thing in New York City, right? We're gonna assume you're not supposed to be here.
Facts.
Until you can prove that you are supposed to be here. Now, that's pretty easy for most of us. It's, a lot of Black Americans, we present a certain way, but now we've got the Haitians and the statement that he made during that they were eating the cats and the dogs. And now those Black folks that look like, you can't tell who's a Haitian and who
they coming for us.
So
we just got implicated.
Absolutely.
As soon as, and listen, my Haitian brothers, y'all are implicated too. Like everybody, when he had his eye on Mexicans, everyone who looked like if you halfway look like a Mexican, you were in trouble.
Everybody will start working on their English diction
very
so that
clearly.
They can speak clearly and properly,
very
no
clearly.
accents.
If you got any trace of an accent, you are in trouble in these coming days.
Listen.
And look, we're again.
It's not funny, but
you gotta laugh to stop from crying.
Exactly, it's crazy.
Because this is the reality. You could either sit up here and tell us we don't think he's going to do it, which I've heard some people say. Why would you assume that? If you said, okay, it's just, in one breath you say, what I like about Trump is he does what he says he's going to do. And then in another breath, you talk out the other side of your mouth and say, I don't think he's going to do something he specifically not just said he's going to do, but ran on.
Absolutely.
He ran on this specific thing and said this is a day one agenda. He's already hired somebody who looks like a guy who, you see the guy he hired? Hey,
Yes.
Kawan gonna put a picture of this guy looks like he sleeps in a coffin, wakes up. Like, this guy looks like, no, and listen, I don't mean, like, this guy looks like, I don't know. This guy looks like death walking. Dangerous guy. Looks like he used to bodyguard for celebrities and just not say anything. Looks like he can shoot, fight. That's just what I think of.
He was a former law enforcement officer, if I recall. So he's got that background. And, yeah.
It's not like you brought a guy in that people are like, oh, we could tell he's for the people. He's an innocent-looking guy. You ain't got to.
Well, he's choosing people that have already proclaimed fealty to him. They've already, like, kissed the ring, you know? And that's the only way that you're able to get a job in this new administration is to have shown, you know, that you were going to be loyal to him throughout all his claims of stolen election from the last time, et cetera, et cetera. If you remain loyal to him, you've got a shot. Mm-hmm. Now, he gets flat out told Pompeo and Nikki Haley, sorry, no room for you. Yeah. You know, you know, a lot of times Nikki Haley hasn't really distanced herself from him that much, but maybe a little bit. She's tried to distance herself, but she didn't totally do so, and that's not enough loyalty for him. So he's told her she's persona non grata in this new iteration of his administration. So from that perspective, it's a little frightening to see the people that he's gathering.
It's like there's no heart there. There's very little. I'm not going to say these guys don't have heart. I'm going to tell you that they look very stoic. They look like, so are you going to break up families? No, we'll deport them all together.
That's the guy. That's the guy. And he said that, I guess it was on 60 Minutes or something. I saw him, and yeah, he actually made that statement.
Serious?
Like, is the commentator asked him, is there any way to stop from splitting up families? Yeah, we can ship them all home.
All home.
You know? And
that and quick. So when we consider the people, and this is how they speak, why would we think that the people who are going to be enforcing and doing the job would have a different heart? Because here's what I see. Hey, bro, you Haitian? Nah, man, I ain't Haitian. I'm American.
Why don't you run me some ID?
Yeah. Hey, you got your papers on you? You know.
What, my freedom papers? What?
Yeah.
What kind of papers?
Papers. Hey, do me a favor. Hey, see, depends on who's doing the job. That's the energy that's coming. I see it. People, hey, how you doing? Hey, yeah, you got any migrants in here? Who's coming in the house? Are the people coming in looking like local law enforcement that we know and trust and like, hey, Officer Jones? No, this is some guy. This is some group that just was newly hired, doesn't know anything about this town, was sent in under federal order, given instructions on where people are. I mean, how do you deport 15 million people in a country with over 100 million households without going and checking people's houses. That means literally, if there's let's call it 100 some odd million households, you're talking about potentially 1 out of every 5, 1 out of every 6 households might be harboring somebody. They have to check the houses.
Yeah, that's probably not going to work out well. I don't think. I don't know. I'm not putting that out there. I'm just saying it's a little impractical, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what people are focused on. The one thing that I hearken back to is this.
There's no Congress to stop it.
Well, that part.
Sorry.
But
we'll talk about that later.
People are acting as if in President Trump's first administration, he also ran on building a wall. That means that there was an immigration problem at that point too. He went through 4 years, and I found it so interesting that his narrative during this campaign time was that Vice President Kamala Harris, she's been in office for 3.5 years, and she hasn't done anything about any of these things. Now, this is where that critical thinking comes in again. Mm-hmm. If you ran on a platform of immigration back in 2016, and then you were president until 2020, and the immigration problem still existed at the end of your presidency, then how can you now say about someone else who was not the top lawmaker and not the top executive, was a vice president, and saying that in 3.5 years she didn't do what she was supposed to do? So he ran on this and very issue.
The country agrees,
and we never did anything because we don't teach people to think.
So listen,
if you can't think that through and be like, well, wait a second, you're telling us immigration is this huge problem, yet you ran on immigration, in your first term. You didn't solve it. You didn't build the wall. You didn't do what you said. Mexico did not build the wall and pay for it.
That's a fact. That's a fact. See, I think when we consider how Trump's presidency came about, in my opinion, you just didn't have a strong enough candidate to go against that personality. And, no one knew who. A lot of people who were calling to vote for Kamala Harris, if you'd have heard them talk about her a year ago, True. They in no way, they were saying it was a bad pick. They were saying it was a bad pick for VP. I know people who literally was saying when Joe Biden was starting to kind of struggle, they were like, man, dang, he shouldn't have picked Kamala. Mm-hmm. Because everybody was saying, man, you're praying for, Michelle Obama. Will she just come out of
right.
her not? This is what people are saying. Nobody was.
Or Gavin Newsom or somebody like that.
Somebody who can go. Right. Somebody who is basically. It's sad to say that we're in a world where, these personalities take over. But at the end of the day, we live in a world of viral videos, and a lot of people don't see these things happening unless they went viral. So, it's hard for Kamala to compete with Trump, who is going to go viral on his own. He has 80 million followers.
He has that personality.
And again, that's another. So when to wrap up the mass deportation thing, I want to segue into another thing that's disturbing me concerning these concentrated alliances that these concentrated alliances that are essentially a media propaganda machine, depending on how it's used. And what I mean is, if Rogan has the biggest podcast on earth, and Donald Trump has 90 million followers on Twitter or X, Elon Musk has 200 million followers, that right there is, that's 3 guys that could speak to pretty much the whole United States.
Now, pardon my ignorance about the whole, the way the social media works, but how many of those, the question that you want to ask is, how many of those are how much crossover is there?
Very, very little.
So, really?
I would say very little. 200 million?
If there's 200 million, how much of the 200 million that President Trump has are also followers of Joe Rogan? So they're not separate and
They
distinct
don't just have
audiences.
the same audiences.
But I'm sure there's got to be a lot of overlap.
There's some overlap, but it's not when you consider who these people. Let's look at the origination. Elon Musk gains his followers originally by being one of this generation's foremost leaders and brilliant minds, and he's built things in the tech world. That's not Donald Trump's audience. How he started it, he starts as a real estate developer, entertainer. That's how he built it. Rogan starts out Fear Factor, and then UFC, and
right.
These people are coming from different places when they're following these guys. You throw Tucker, what's his name? Tucker Carlson
Tucker
in
Carlson.
there.
Mm-hmm.
You throw Tucker Carlson in there, and he's another guy who speaks to 100 million people when he wants to. And that's a Fox News audience that he brought and cultivated over the years. So when we look at the concentration of media, this is dangerous to let 4 people who agree on certain things speak to billions of people, because the world is watching. And when we consider what the new antitrust laws should look like, the new antitrust laws should not muffle speech, but definitely watch the collusion because how can someone compete when 4 guys can speak to 500 million people? How can a news platform compete?
Hello, Black America.